Hello guys, welcome back. And as you can see, I got my my road bed laid down. Well, technically it's not road bed. It's really would be considered subgrade in engineering terms, but you know, road bed is the rail and the ballast and in this case the cork. But anyway, I'm going with the road bed because that's what everybody else calls it. So yeah, I got the road bed in, and as you can see, it's basically 3 levels. This lower level here, this is all set at the same elevation, consistent elevation all the way for the length of the layout, wrapping around, and even this middle section here, this is still set at the same elevation as this. I guess as you can notice, the middle part there is depressed down about a 1/2 inch, and the reason I did it that way was because I want to incorporate some drainage structures like culverts, head walls, drainage ditches, things like that in the train yard and in the engine facility area. You know, that mimics more the real world. So not only that, but if the layout was just totally flat, it would be a little bit mundane. So I wanted to vary the topography a little bit to add a little bit more character to it. So yeah, starting here at the backdrop for the higher level track, start there, and we're climbing at a consistent 1.5% grade all the way around to, you know, to where it terminates over here. And my plan here is to, at the end here, is eventually I want to build a swing gate or a lift gate. I haven't decided yet. I'm kind of leaning more towards the swing gate because I want to be able to, or I've been thinking about putting a backdrop on the swing gate, and then when I go to shut it, you know, the backdrop would just carry through on to phase 2 of Alvaville. But anyway, back here on phase 1, yeah, everything went in well. It seems all my grades seem like they were set correctly. Speaking of grades, for those of you who have never calculated grades, it's really not very hard. It's the old rise over run that you learned in junior high. So like if we take the higher track and we start here, and let's just call this station 0 plus 0, 0. This is our beginning station. If you, let's say it's 2 feet from there around to, I don't know, this grid line right here. It's actually probably more like 2.5 feet. We'll say 2.5 feet. All you got to do is take that length, and you know, you can measure it with a tape or whatever, and get my calculator out here. So if we have 2.5 feet, that's actually 30 inches, right? So we take 30 inches times, now we said 1.5%. You need to put that in decimal form, which would be 1.5 divided by 100. All that does is move the decimal place 2 places over to the left, so it'd be 30 times 0.015. Now what that gives us is it gives us 0.45. Now that's in tenths of an inch. So we would add that to our base station. So that 0 plus 0, 0 station. So if we could look under here real quick, the joist here, you know, we call them 1x2s. So they really measure like 1.5 inches. But the riser here is cut at 2 inches. And so what I've done here is I used the bottom of the joist since everything is nice and level. I don't know if you remember a couple of videos back, I was really pushing to get everything level. That's one of the reasons why. So using the bottom of the joist, we come up to 2 inches for the riser, and that puts us here at this elevation here. And that's what I'm calling the base elevation. So since all the risers are going to be aligned with the bottom of the joist here, So we can take that 2 inches, and that'll be, like I said, our base elevation. So in this case, we have 0.45, so if we just add that to 2, there you go, it gives us 2.45. Now that's what the next riser would need to be cut at. So looking here at my engineer's scale, and by the way, you can buy these at any office place, supply place. They're relatively cheap. But you know, we come over 2 inches, and each one of these tick marks is 1/10 of an inch. Well, in this particular case, it's 2.45, so 2.45 on here is going to put us about where my thumbnail's at right there. So this is what I use this at my miter saw. This is what I use to measure the risers, and I would cut that riser out at 2.45 and then install it on the joist, mount it to the joist. And the thing you want to do here is you want to store that number. It's important that you store it. So store that number, then you come over your next measurement. So let's just say from that grid line there over to this grid line here, well, each grid is a foot, so that's 3 feet or 36 inches. So come back over here to the calculator, take 36 times 0.015, whoops, 0.015, that gives us 0.54. So then we add that to what we just stored. And there you go. That riser needs to be cut at almost 3 inches. So then we would install that riser. And again, we would store that number for the next riser. And then let's just say from that riser there, we want to install a riser here, which is one I've got, because these are actually 2 1x3 risers here and 2 1x3 risers here. And I've got a middle one in here just as a support to keep anything from sagging. So that's 1 foot, so that's 12 inches. So we come over here and 12 times 0.015 plus what we stored in this case alpha A, 2.99, so 2.99 plus 0.18, 3.17. So that's what you would cut this riser right here at. And so, you know, really you do that for the length, for the duration of your grade, unless the grade changes, or in this case it stops. So that's how I do that. It's not very hard to do. Personally, I like doing it that way. I just like I like seeing my plan come together. So that's how I got the grade set on these. Now, I know in the last video we talked about the cookie cutter method, and I just talked about laying some track down. And the more I thought about it, the more I thought, well, I don't really need to lay the track down, just simply because my track plan I was able to import into CAD, and I know that the numbers and everything on that are solid. And you know, I did, like I said, I did grid off the track plan and kind of transpose that here to, you know, to the tabletop with a 1x1 grid. So, you know, if we look back over here, at my track plan, you can see I've got these dash lines in there now, and so these are what I'm calling my cut lines. So can you see that magenta line there? You know, that's that cut I made with a jigsaw on the plywood. You know, what I did is I used my grid here as a coordinate system, and I said, okay, at this grid intersection here, you know, measure up 0.61, and I made a mark with a pencil, and then I come over here to this grid coordinate here and measured up, and I don't know, let's just say hypothetically it's 0.5. You know, I made a mark at 0.5, and I just took a straight edge and intersected the two. when I get down here to the curves, you know, I might measure up from here to the cut line and maybe over this way to the cut line. Then I have 3 points for my arc. Then what I do is I just take a piece of, you know, hardboard, something that's real flexible, and just bend it on those 3 points, and then use a pencil and draw that line in. So that's how I'm able to transpose these cut lines over to the tabletop. You know, the blue line there, that's the middle level. You know, like I was showing you earlier, you know, the grade for it doesn't really start until here. And then the green line is the higher level track. So, you know, once I got all my cut lines transposed over onto the plywood, and like I said, I was able to take a jigsaw and come through and just cut everything out. I feel confident about what I've done just simply because I know that the CAD affords me the opportunity to be very precise. So the track should go down just fine. And, you know, probably 95% of my track's going to be Code 100 Flex track anyway. So, you know, it's not, it has some flexibility. It wouldn't be as rigid as, say, a set, you know, what set track is. So, so if I do have to make any adjustments, I think I'll be able to do that. I mentioned in the last video also that I was thinking about using extruded foam, and I went ahead and decided I would. I'm going to be using 1-inch extruded foam, and so foam's going to cover, you know, everything here. And the reason I wanted to go with foam is there's a couple of reasons. Primarily because I'm using Atlas under the table switches, and what the foam will enable me to do is to embed those switches inside of it. So basically what you do is you just cut out a, I don't know, say a 1 by 3 inch pit in the foam. You know, go ahead and take it all the way down to the plywood, and then take your under the table switch and just mount it to, say, some 3/16 inch hardboard, and then, you know, lay that on top of the pit, and there you go. You don't have to install underneath the plywood. And the reason I'm wanting to do it like that is because, I mean, as you can see, I've got, you know, mini joist here going across here, and I've also got all these splice plates. You know, I don't know if you can see those or not, up underneath there. And like for this particular area of my layout is where I've got all the turnouts coming into the train yard, and I didn't want to, you know, have to mess around with moving stuff, you know, moving joist and all that around. And so that's primarily the reason I wanted to go with the foam. The second reason is just because foam is a lot easier to work with as far as you know, scenery. It's easy to install trees and buildings, and you know, like I said, I wanted to incorporate some drainage structures, so I want to be able to you know, to cut some ditches, you know, through the foam, and, you know, make it look more realistic, you know, with the, you know, the town of Alvaville. It's going to be right here. And you remember this is 1.5% grade. Well, you know, that foam will enable me to go through with the partial building flats, which I'll be installing along the length here for Alvaville. But it'll enable me to kind of carve out a foundation for the buildings, if you will, and make sure they're level to add some more realism to the layout. Speaking of Alvaville, I think I'm going to try my hand at the digital imaging for the buildings mounted to the backdrop. So I'm going to try that and see if that adds a lot more depth to the layout. So that's really my plan. I guess really the next step's going to be to getting the control panel here, getting it installed. As I mentioned earlier, I'm going with a DC layout. So I've got a lot of wiring to do as far as my block selectors. I'm running a dual cab power pack, so you know, I've got the various blocks I need to wire up, as well as all the turnouts to wire up still. And so I need to install my bus my bus wire. But yeah, you know, that's kind of why I'm waiting to install the fascia and I don't know, even the valance. I mean, I'm not in any hurry to install any of that right now. I want to get all this stuff kind of out of the way and then work on it, on the cosmetics of the layout later on. So so yeah, I mean, it's, you know, this is kind of an urban setting here for phase 1. I am going to be installing a, you know, a small mountainous area here, if you will, to break up well, to convey the idea of you know, leaving an urban setting and moving out more towards probably more of a countryside setting, which, you know, phase 2 is definitely going to have a lot of mountains. It's going to have a small stream with some trestles, and you know, it's going to be an industrial branch. So, you know, just wanting to try to break that, you know, convey that idea of moving away from a small town setting into more of an urban country setting for the industrial branch. So that's my idea for the layout so far. And seemed like there was one other thing I wanted to share with you guys, and I cannot remember what it is at this point. But yeah, so I guess the next couple of videos, or next couple, but the next videos will just kind of be a montage of me, you know, getting the control panel in. When it does come time for me to do the wiring, I'm going to explain that in detail, you know, what I'm doing as far as wiring up the various blocks and stuff for DC layout. So I'm excited about that. And I'll go into detail, like I said, with that, just to, you know, any of you guys who are wanting to try to do it DC or maybe can't afford DCC. And, you know, my reasons are, well, DCC is expensive, but it's not out of my price range. I'm just more wanting to see if I can implement, you know, what some of the old school model railroaders, what they were able to achieve with their layout. So let's see if I can do it like that first and see how it goes. So we will keep you posted, and I will be back soon with some more video, and y'all take care.